Scotch-Brite wheel, polished hammer faces. Why are we showing you a pencil pointing at a clear spot of bluing? Because we've got this. Now this is a Marlin Model 30 and 16 gauge that no one has actually molested or, for that matter, done any maintenance on. This is a heavy duty conservation job because you can see here, this stuff has second level, it's raised. And what do you do about that? And what were the collectors telling us in the 1950s? What they were begging you to do was not wire wheel this off. But this gun is an example of what patina looks like when it's left unchecked and the oil dries out and you wind up with it. So I have no idea about what the inside of this gun looks like, how to take it apart, what its manual of arms are. Here we are, we're presented with a machine. And this particular machine is designed to propel small spherical objects at about 1,200 feet per second. So let's get down inside this thing, figure out how it works, and see if we can get it back together again and get it running. And remember, guys, the manual of arms of old guns are not what you expect. So do some research. The Marlin Model 30 was made in a range between 1911 and 1917. We have detected on the top of the barrel, and notice we didn't scrub this gun down, but there is a patent pending date, 23 February 1915. So we would then tend to believe that this gun was in the zone of right in the 15, 16, and then they stopped making them in 17, I guess. But now we have a pretty good idea of when the gun was made. That's the first one. The second one is these things have kind of a low-grade reputation for having an offbeat manual of arms. Never expect a 100-year-old gun to work the way a modern one does. We've had 2 world wars since this gun was built. We've had a couple of police actions. We've had a lot of things to sort out what a shotgun is supposed to do. This isn't it. We'll take this thing apart, and getting it apart isn't the thing you really want to see. You really want to see me put it back together again. We're going to look at a couple of things. There's a coil spring sticking out of this attempt at an extractor. We're going to take a look at that. Right here, you see that little bit of coil spring there. That's probably not right. And then you got, well, I don't know what that is, but there's a variety of tears, rips, and extra holes that have been punched through this magazine tube. We got to figure that out. The part we were pointing to in the beginning is right, hang on a minute, I'll get it to you. It's right there. This is that part right there. You can see there's actually some bluing. This gun was beautiful when it was made. Are we going to be able to take this rusted thing and bring it back to that? No. That's one of the big things I wanted to talk about is we get asked, and I don't say it in public, but some of this rust is probably going to have to get ground off this gun with a pretty stiff actual wire wheel, not a conversion, not a carding wheel, but an actual wire wheel. Some of the stuff the collectors in the 50s and the 60s were saying wasn't wrong. Okay, what they were trying to keep you from doing was taking this gun and wire wheeling it down to the white. What I'm telling you is you may have to, because in the intervening 70 years of not oiling it and don't do any maintenance, you wind up with this. And you can see this is 3-dimensional rust, as I pointed out in the intro, and we're going to go convert this and see what it looks like when we get done. But I'm more interested in making the thing work. This is a movie prop gun, so this has to look like it's 1915 when I'm done with it. It's got to look that way, and that's sacrilege. Is it really? Shouldn't it have maintained in a way that it looks like it was 1915 because the gun was never allowed to patina up like this? Yeah, well, we all know where I think about that. So let me start taking this thing apart. We took the stock bolt out, and as you can see, this is what we're going to confront down in the entire gun. The 3 days worth of croiling really helped because it dynamited. Usually they'll glue themselves in up here, and if you look back there, you can see that ring of schmutz that will usually glue this in. This is up in the middle of the stock somewhere. We'll take a look at it, but I got a feeling that every fastener in this gun is going to look kind of like that. So I'm taking the screw slot edge on like this and just tapping it. And I don't know if you see how much stuff is dynamiting out of this. There's stuff floating away here. Let me get it from the bottom. Maybe you can see it that way. But all this dirt, you can see it all floating out of there. I'm not hitting it very hard. But what I'm attempting to do is dynamite the concretions out of this that will allow us to get the screw down in the slot and not have the screwdriver slip when we try to use it. So now, maybe we can come in, out, in, out. Here we go. So you see how orange that is right there when that's coming out? Yeah, that's pretty nasty here, right there. This butt plate is in fabulous shape for the age of the gun, but the screw is a little bit rusted up. And the oxide jack, you've seen this before. We've done this before. And guys, I've got a lot of other videos out there about, we've taken apart and put together a lot of guns. But I'm showing you this just to give you a general overall sense of what we're going to be confronted with down inside this thing. And we'll just keep going. So the reason why I did this was to, hang on a minute here. Let's see if I can get lucky and pop this off. Okay, hang on. I'm checking to make sure that I don't have any screws sticking through this thing right here, and I don't. We've got the stock, we've got the tang bolt out, and most importantly, we don't have a stock bolt. Anyway, you can get right here and just use the weight of the gun against itself. Yeah, it's coming. Okay. Well, alrighty then. Let's have a look inside here. There used to be some bluing on this thing somewhere. So this is the rust loading we have up inside the gun. Remember, guys, don't do any maintenance or else you'll make the value of your gun less. I don't know if you detected the sarcasm in my voice, but there it is. So this is what we're fighting up inside, and that also kind of oxide jacked up against the wood. So the wood's got a lot of look at this. I mean, we gotta knock that out, and you gotta be gentle about it, but it's gotta be knocked out. That's not doing the wood any good either. Wow. All right, we've dynamited the fore end off of this thing, and I say dynamite. There's a takedown arrangement here, and you can see that hook. Well, the other end of the hook is broken, you see. So when that's there and the inside of the mag tube slides up, that's supposed to be a hook like that. Well, without that hook, their answer was drill a hole and stick this hardware store screw through it. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually, I don't know, we're going to make an attempt. I'm going to have my welder buddy, see somebody else try to weld it already. This is I don't know, maybe we'll look at making that piece or see if I can just find one. I might be able to find one and fix this, because the tube is Swiss cheesed pretty good. This, I believe, is where when it broke, under recoil, the tube wants to go forward, or it appears to go forward as the gun disappears out from behind it. And that's probably what beat that up right there. This hole here allows you to, right there, allows you to get to the mounting screw. And when you come back a little bit further, there is this little itty bitty lock-in screw that goes up in there. So that's, I'm trying to document all this as we're going through. Never had this gun apart, but we're seeing what we got. And I think that's what happened, was the guy just made it work, which, okay, I can see that. Look at the bottom of the barrel here. And we can see all this patina on it, and the gun hadn't been maintenance, and it's so everything here that looks wet is just because I've drowned this thing in about a half a can of Croil. I don't know if the barrel comes off, but this sleeve appears to set the rotation of the barrel. We'll play with that when we get the bolt out of it. We'll play with that. But as you can see here, this is I mean, it's gacked up 6 ways a Sunday. But we'll keep going, because what I haven't been able to show you guys yet is when the gun was purchased as a prop, the guy that bought it, look, Jeremiah's been on the show before. Jeremiah has been here from Artistry in Motion. He looked down the bore, and I got to tell you what, the bore on this thing is silver with a lot of dirt and spider webs, but it's silver. And you always buy the bore. We can fix the rest of it. I'm taking photographs of this thing as I'm taking it apart, and I'm laying everything out in functional groups. Over here we have the trigger, the mainspring, the trigger spring, a bunch of things that go in this bottom metal, and I gotta tell you, this thing is nasty. We got the 2 screws that came out of the butt plate, and you can see those from over here, how orange those are. Anyway, but I'm laying them down in functional groups. So we got the firing pin return spring, and then all of the things that hold the bolt together, all right? And this is that crushed ejector spring that we saw before, and it's gnarled up pretty good. We come over here. This is the gizmo that operates the lock and block, and it didn't work, because I'm going to tell you, and it still doesn't work, because there's a plunger right here that particular plunger does not move up and down, which means it does not put a rotational force on this block that makes it want to rotate counterclockwise from your advantage. Because it doesn't do that, this lock does not engage in something up in the bolt, and we're not entirely positive what it does yet. All right. The inside of the magazine tube had this. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a 30-03, but this is their idea of getting a stack that was in there, and that's probably been in there forever, because what it took to dynamite the magazine tube apart, we still haven't got this off. This is supposed to unthread, and I'm going to tell you, I might very well, see these cracks? I might very well split the wood off of this. I might actually break it to be able to get up underneath it, get it apart, and get it all out, because all that dirt you saw before, I wire wheeled that off, and it's actually, it's corroded pretty good. Lifter, it's the inside hammer. You can see here the broken hook. There's supposed to be a hook here that engages there. That's supposed to snap on, and then to take the gun apart, you squeeze and pull. And that's how it's supposed to come apart. It didn't. So because of that, this hardware screw and castellated nut and whatever else grinding they did on it was kind of put through one of the 15 holes up in the front end of this thing. All right. It's just done that way. The inside of this thing is just nasty. I'm pretty sure we're the first people up inside this gun in a long time. We'll get back in there and do that. If you're looking at this gun, you got to wonder who was ripping off who. Was Marlin ripping off Remington, or was Remington ripping off Marlin? Winchester enters the chat. There's that. So you guys have heard me say before, buy the bore. And Jeremiah said, I've got this voice inside my head that said, buy the bore. And I'm going to tell you what, that's dirt. The inside of this bore is silver. So let me mop this thing out. Hold what you got. Make it any better? Yeah, it did. Let me look at this and make sure that I'm not being stupid here. Okay, yeah. That's a little bit of rust that's going to convert out. I just ran a tornado brush up it real quick. That's a little bit of dirt, but basically we got a shiny bore here with no pits, and we can fix the rest of this gack. All right, this is going to be difficult to show here, but I'm going to try to show it. We got a tail with 2 barrels. So this barrel come off an old Ithaca, and this has been boiled, and it was black when I put it in the tank. And this is what patina looks like when you take the oil out of it, all right? And we're attempting here to show what this looks like, but the real tail is going to be when I card these two. I'm going to go ahead and take the take the outside oxide off of this, and then we're going to take the outside oxide off of this. And I am just trying to come up with a way to convey to you what this looks like. And this is three-dimensional rust, and we'll try to get it here. So the line, as it goes over the top, the white to dark line is kind of fuzzy. And on this gun, the white to dark line is sharp and delineated. All right, so there's a three-dimensional rust problem over here. And it's probably not going to card straight off. And it might take 2 or 3. I'm going to cut to the chase and tell you straight up, there's 100 years worth of rust on this gun, and it went on slow. Oh my God. This one isn't bad. This is what most guns look like. Most guns, when they walk in here, look like this, and this will card out. This gun will be almost jet black when I'm done with it. There won't be a spot of rust on it. It's going to look great. All right, so now we're going to go back to the carding wheel, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is a carding wheel. We've showed it before. It's fairly soft. If you try this with a regular wire wheel, you'll come back with blood. So as we can see here, that cards right off. That rust that's not really rust. This is a converted oxide just laying on the surface. You can see how black these tubes are turning? It's because these were not that bad. I just wanted to get all that rust off the bottom of the barrels so that now when we oil them, so there's kind of a after, before, all right? You see how effortless this is. I'm not pushing very hard on this wheel, and in fact, this wheel isn't held here by much. It can just move. It's only held here by gravity. So I'm not putting a tremendous amount of force down on this, all right? So this is where it gets a little dicey. Right? So down underneath, where it had not had an opportunity to have a lot of atmospheric oxygen on it, you can see this blue in here. Back here on the receiver, and you can hear this thing working. That's me bumping the tripod because this barrel's sticking out a while. See, so now, and we've had these comments before in these videos. They go, what about rust that you convert and it doesn't card? And what I'll tell you was, the rust has converted on the surface and then it self-protects. So have you ever seen a container marked Corten steel? Corten steel is designed to rust and protect itself. So we'll go in here and we'll get this good and hard. All right. We're going to switch over to a significantly more aggressive wheel here on the bottom of the barrel. The decision to allow this gun to go this far over the edge was not made by us. So as you can see, we got a lot of it, but we did not get it all. And it's definitely up in the areas where it doesn't want to play. Hang on a minute. So this is on the top, it came off up here. So I'm gonna commit sacrilege and I'm gonna turn part of this gun white. Because I know that once I go beyond this point, and I knew this when I started this gun, that I was going to wind up having to basically re-rust blue it. But we've got to get this heavy-duty oxide layer off. Now, if this three-dimensional rust had, say, what I would call a shank or something that's sticking up in 3 dimensions, we'd have to bang on it with a hammer. And I don't think we have anything that's quite that heavy duty here, but this is why we had to polish our hammer faces, because we don't want to grind, beat down through this with a hammer that has stuff on it. Okay, so that's about all I could get off of this with a carding wheel. There are more aggressive options, however. What I'm about to do is considered sacrilege, and I understand that, but it's sacrilege, and we have to do it here. On the side of this wheel, and I'm going to do it underneath the bottom of the barrel here, I'm going to gently begin to get this, and you'll see that this rust starts to turn almost a bright orange because we're actually cutting through the rust. But we have to do this, and we're going to have to boil it again for about another 45 minutes. Don't boil more than 45 minutes. You're just wasting your time and burning fuel. 45 minutes per attempt. Now, I'm not pushing very hard, and as yet I'm not taking any of the blue off, but it's going to get there because we may get to the point where this barrel has to be bead blasted, and I think it's going to have to be bead blasted and then lightly hand polished. So you see, this actually pitted. The problem is, metal is polished, then it is roll marked, then it's blued, and it has to be done in that order. You cannot come back and polish and then blue again. That's not the order. The order is polish, roll mark, and blue. If you then polish, you have roll marked, blued, and polished. You're out of order. So now I'm going to get to a spot here where that's not very, and I'm going to show you what the 1950s collectors were begging you to not do to a gun like this. I'm going to get on it pretty hard here. Okay, and we almost got it, but I can still feel, right? It still has some of its color, but it's turning white. So I've crossed the line where I'm going to have to re-blue this gun. But I knew that before we cracked the first screw out of it. So I'm going to go over the rest of this barrel like this, take the rest of this heavier rust off of it, and then we're going to hang it in a conversion tank again. But if you look, I don't know if the camera's catching this, but there's 3 dimensions there. This is sticking up above. Now I'll get asked, why not an electrolytic conversion process? Why not take this thing, pretend it's the CSS Hunley or a Canon that we just drug up out of the Ashapoo, put reverse current on it? Well, the problem is that it will dump all this iron right where it is, and you will lose any existing polish that may or may not have already been on the barrel. Okay, so I don't know if that's showing up, but those are pits. See that? I'm trying to roll it. Those are pits, and those are not coming out. So then we get into the conundrum of, if we re-blue this gun, we're bluing it over the pits. And out here by the muzzle, you can see the damage is extreme. So much so that, you know, we're going to have to draw file that because we're not backed by any of the engraving. But as we draw file that, the wall thickness of the barrel that will go down, there's a lot of variables here. There's a lot of variables here. But you can see the damage had been done to this gun, and it's extreme. And that damage does not exist on the other gun, which had been kept relatively well oiled, and then it's once in 50 years, it's getting stripped down, converted out, changed over. And you can see where it's starting to turn white because we're cutting through the black oxide that's on the surface, the ferroferric oxide, and we're getting down to bare. Right? So I will finish carting the rest of this gun on a more aggressive wheel. Then I'm going to hang it in the tank, and we're going to come back, we're going to try this again. We got to figure this out, all right? This particular forend, you see, doesn't have the spanner notches in it. We got no way to get any torque on this thing, and we've tried to grab it in the vice jaws and turn this off. We've had Croyle on this thing now for 3 days, and the threads that start back here, there's a tube that runs up the inside of this thing, and this cap threads on like almost every other pump gun that you're used to. The problem is we can't budge it, and we need to take this tube off of this forend because we got to get up underneath here. This tube is going to need some serious cosmetic help. Not cosmetic help, it's going to need some structural help. Look at the front end of this thing. I mean, it's, you know, I'm making a decision whether or not I can find a piece of pipe like this and just make another one. But the problem is that until we get there, we got to do something with this chunk of wood. And we're going to have to split this chunk of wood as best as I can do it. This is going to get ugly here. Oh boy. That's what we were fighting right there. That's why we just sacrificed a piece of walnut to the freaking gun gods, because that, okay, that was going on down inside the gun. That the walnut just had to go. And I know that that's giving some people the creeps, but it's got to come off, because it's just got to come off. This gun got wet. Okay. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to preserve the dimensions of this. So now I've got what I need to know. I know what that end right there looks like. I know what this end right here looks like. So now I know the difference, the distance from here to here. And then it's just take a block of walnut, bore a whatever the heck diameter hole this is down the center of it, mount it, take the whole thing, put it in a lathe and spin it. And then I'll get it round, and we can cut the grooves, and bang, we're back in the game again. But if you're looking at this, this is the brass ring. This is why this had to go. Gee, I wonder why we couldn't unthread this. I wonder why that wouldn't unthread right there. So now we're working on just metal, and I know I've destroyed the forend, but that's just a piece of walnut. I'm a better stock maker than I am anything else. We'll just go ahead and make a piece of a stock here. So we're going to clean this up, you know, spray it down a little bit of brake cleaner, clean it up. And then I'm going to go boil this whole thing. I got the tanks hot. I'm going to go convert this out, try to break some of that rust up, and then figure out a way to get this to unthread. Because this is the unobtainium part. The wood is relatively easy. So after the wood came off, Bruno and I had to part company because he's got stuff to do and I got stuff to do. In order to make a new forend for this thing, I was going to have to get the forend cap off. And it was 3 straight days of pouring Croyle in here, heating it up, cooling it down, heating it up, more Croyle. That thing is welded. So out came the Dremel, and I cut this notch and kind of took the load off the screws. And as soon as I cut that notch, it popped, and I was able to spin it apart. Underneath all that was this nasty, oily pile of gack. Holy cow. Got this all cleaned off. Got the metal part for the slide and the magazine tube into the conservation vat, and here you go. So I got everything caught up, and now we are at the lowest common denominator. So there's something I want to point out here. This thing's been converted 3 times. This has only been converted once, and the thing I want to show you is this. You see how beautiful and black and smooth this is, and there's no oil on this at all. It's gorgeous when you oil it. This is what it looks like after it come out of the conversion tank, and it didn't have nearly as much of that oxide on it because it was all gone in the first conversion pass. I ran it through again just to get it hot so I could oil it. But this is what it looks like when it doesn't have pitted rust, when the rust was on the surface, when it was true patina. Now, This gun had been patinaed down, and then it went beyond patina. And I don't know if you can see it as I'm rolling it through here, but I want you to see the pits. And there's still a little bit of it that's three-dimensional. I'm going to call the owner of this and ask him if he wants me to bead blast it or just stop here. This right now is at 3, and I could probably do it one more, but one more pass. We've gotten rid of all the stuff that's standing up on the surface, and everything that's left is a pit. And you can see some of this doesn't look too bad, but some of it, you get up here by the muzzles, and it's just horrible up here by the muzzles. It just got rotted, and there's nothing you can do to make that go away. Short of, you know, what Mr. Turnbull does, which is remanufacture these things, but that's not what we're doing. So here, you've got the trigger guard, and I'm telling you, all 3 of these units look the same, but this rust hadn't been going on for 70 years, really, really, really slow. This was just under the oil, the rust you get under the oil. Patina, okay, that's great, but I don't like patina. Do the maintenance. So we can see all 3 stages. This is where we were before the first conversion, and then we converted, hardwire wheeled, converted again, hardwire wheeled, converted a 3rd time, and did it on a soft wheel. And we're getting there. But that's my answer. Now, Bob Veazey and I did a video about how to rust blue a gun, and I'll put that link in here so you can pop over to it. How to actually rust blue a gun's a complete video into itself, and I'm not going to cover it here. But there you go. This is what's hiding underneath 80% of these guns, and what's hiding up underneath the stock line of most milsurps is that garbage I just showed you out at the muzzle. We're at the bottom now. I got all this. I mean, there are lines in here from where this thing darn near rotted through the tube. So we had to come to the decision to go ahead and powder the wood. So here we are, lowest common denominator. So now let's talk about what's broken and what we got to deal with now that we're at the bottom here, okay? The first one was the hook magazine tube together. We've TIG welded a block on here. This all has to be shaped and turned back into a hook that interacts with this, so that when all this is done, these will clip together. This may or may not hold. Somebody had tried to weld it in the past, and they didn't get it clean enough, and they didn't penetrate it, and it blobbed right off the top. In this particular case, the guy that does my welding for me, and it's not me, but Colin knows how to penetrate a weld, and I will guarantee you it melded all the way to the bottom. So we stand a fighting chance here. So that's the first thing we got to fix. The second thing that we're going to have to fix is this sear right here has what used to be a spring in it that kept this rotated up against the hammer, and we'll cover this in higher detail here in a moment. But that spring is broken, so that's the first spring that's broken. There is an extractor in here with this gnarled up piece of spring that we had. It's not going to get it. That was this spring. This is a fix unto itself, and I don't know how the heck we're going to do that. The next thing we're going to have to figure out is, remember I cut a slot in this cap? This has got to get ground and polished, and it's got to get back to the point where it can thread onto this. Once we do that, that is going to allow us to deal with that. This is a very complex evolution, and it's probably going to be a video unto itself. And probably you won't see the whole detail of it, because God, this is a 45-minute video unto itself here. Guys, the average guy that gets this far into this gun should have quit a long time ago. If we did not have an axe to grind, a video to make, a customer that's going to do a movie and they need some 1930s gangsters to tumble out of a flathead V8 Roadster with a plausible looking, interesting gun, this is us. So this is being done, but I'm telling you that this is a 4-digit bringback, and the average person isn't going to go through that, and the average technician doesn't have the skills to get all the way through it first. So if you bite one of these things off, there's a lot of stuff you got to know how to do. You got to know how to rust blue. You got to either know or have somebody that knows how to weld. My joke is I own a welder, so I can burn the corners off my own parts. You got to be able to do the woodwork. You've got to own a lathe. You got to be able to make springs. This is going to be a pretty hairy thing, and when we're all done, we're going to wind up with a Marlin Model 30G. And having said that, off we go to the races. When we cut this part, when I cut it, if you look here and you look through all the just the goo here, you can see that there's a little bridge that I left in it so that we knew how big it had to be. So when we go back in now, we've welded it back together again, we'll have to grind this part of the weld out. Okay, so I'm only gonna have 95% of the periphery grabbing the threads. It doesn't have to be all the way around. So we'll grind this piece out smooth, grind this down until it fits, and then make this look cosmetically decent when we get done here. Part of the thing, Colin asked me to grind it out just to make sure that he didn't have any inclusions in it, and he didn't, because by the time this comes up round and then that comes off, that's all going to polish back down. Of note, this damage and this damage right here were not caused by us. I did dent the bottom of this thing. If you look ever so carefully, you can see that the bottom's got a little bit of a dent in it because that's where I was grabbing it in the vise. I was putting these here and putting that there. Please do not underestimate the amount of torque I put on this. I did not crack that wood off lightly, and I didn't cut this lightly. In my initial attempt to grind on this, I found out that it was kind of hard. So I'm going to just start by annealing this. We're going to get this good and hot, let it turn red. So when we're welding it, how you come off the welding heat sometimes will cause it to cool off very quickly, and it will quench and get hard. So all I'm going to do now is draw that back. We'll get this nice and red here. It took the nose right off my grindstone. We'll do this. I'm using MAP gas. MAP gas is a mixture of propane and acetylene. And it burns a little bit hotter. I think it burns at about 1,700 degrees, and propane's down around 1,400. And it's expensive, but when you want to get something hotter than average, and then I'm just going to let it cool off a little more slowly. And I'm time multiplexing how long I have the torch on to control its rate of cool down. All right, we'll let that cool off. Now we got to get up in this corner here. We got to get up in this corner, and that's going to require me to switch tools to a flat face tool. This round face tool is great for general shaping, but the problem is that detail in the corners, not so much. Okay, you can see here now I'm getting down into the corner. Now watch air-powered tools, man. These things have the power to destroy as well as create. Okay, a little bit more right down in there. I'm just in awe how these guys made this thing in the first place. I really am. I'm in awe of how the heck they made it in the first place. So when you saw in that picture, I cut down through and I just barely nicked the tops of the threads right here. So if you really go back and look at that schmutzy picture, you can see where the tops of the threads are sticking through, but the bottoms aren't. And that's all you got to, and then you just pop it with a punch, and it just pops the top apart. So let's see here if we can find the beginning of this, and let's see if we got lucky. That's a little bit crooked. I got to find the beginning of the threads here, and maybe, and I mean, just maybe. There's the beginning of the threads, but we're crooked. See how we're crooked here on the top? You don't want to do that, and don't force it. It's got to go down straight. So we got to find straight here. Maybe come back 2 more. Do you hear that snap? Yeah, it's looking pretty good there. Bo, I think I just used up our karma for the month. Yeah, okay, so we're back in. The rest of this is just making it look pretty. That's cosmetics. File it down smooth, polish it, and go. But I got us here. We're not cross-threaded, and we're buried all the way down on the bottom. You can see up, let's see up in here. See, we've come all the way down tight. So that means we would start out back here on the wood and then roll up on it, tighten down on the wood, and get it sit at the back end lined up with the front end. In this light, you can see just how jacked up this tube was, and it was not going to last much longer. There are some spots in here, I don't know how to show it to you, but it almost went through. So it was necessary to take it apart. That pin and that pin right there was going to keep the wood from rotating, even if we could have, even if it wasn't glued down. So this is a win. Let's get on to something else. You can see here this little bit of orange sticking out. This is rust. And what kills these springs, there's something called chloride stress corrosion. If you get a chloride in the presence of a defect while it's loaded, all right, a crack will begin to propagate that will concentrate stress, and it's one of those auto-identifying, self-critiquing deals. I've got a double-barrel Manton in here that the entire left side lock plate is gone because the lock was left cocked, and when the spring broke, it just beat it up. So to get this spring out of here, I made myself a tool, right? And what that's going to let me do is come up inside the back side of this groove here and punch this a little bit. Let me grab a hammer here. Just give me the little one right up there on the rack. Thank you very much, sir. See, and that's just, we're just milking that right out. But the rust component of this is real, right? So you have to get that out of the slot without bending the slot open. Because if we bend the slot open and we stress this piece of steel back here, it will break off and it will look like this. This is the next thing we're going to have to deal with. So, I'm glad I got this pulled up right now. Here we go. So, this, here, let me use this as a pointer. So you see how we have that little ball right there and then we have the piece sticking through? What's missing off of this piece is right here. This used to be, you can even see the end grain of it, used to stick out, and then the spring on this comes down around and goes around the corner, and when it pushes, it causes a rotational moment that makes this spring to the inside. It's not the world's best design, but it is what it is, and it's what we have. So I'm glad we got to see that. So let me pluck this the rest of the way out here. I'll reorient this way. And you can see that little lollipop up on the top of this, and that lollipop is what keeps it from falling out of the hole. Now the question becomes, is how in the heck are we going to put that lollipop on this piece of spring steel? That's cool. All right, anyway, we got to put that little lollipop up on the top, and typically that involves an oxyacetylene torch. So why oxyacetylene? Well, oxyacetylene brings its own oxidizer with it, and it has an incredibly high flame speed. It burns at like 6,000 feet per second is the flame front. So it dumps all of its heat right at the torch tip. Allow me to demonstrate. So there's my piece of spring stock. You see it sticking up right there? The head of this vise is going to wick a tremendous amount of heat off of this. So I'm going to have to get a lot of heat on it very quickly. The torch tip won't be very big. I won't have a lot of fire sticking out of this, but I will have a significant amount of heat. And what will happen is this will melt down into a glob. It'll just kind of, it'll melt down on us. Oh yeah. Flame look much better, right? And then we can throttle back, Here we go. All right, here we go. So I have a small, we're not trying to burn this down. Now, I'm going to tap on it with this hammer, and this vise is going to get hot, and this hammer is going to get hot. So you just got to remember, if you ever do this, so you see there, I'm making that heat there, and as that's balling back, we'll get a close-up on that, but what that's done now is kind of made a Gumby head out of it. And that's going to sit down inside the ball part of that, and then the rest of it's sticking out of the slot. Hey, I'll tell you what, we've got a vise. Why don't we use it? Here we go. You don't want to pull it down too tight because you don't want to bend anything. And trust me, this whole gun's made out of chewing gum. We should be able to just set that right there and tap that in, and now I can't pull it out, you see, and that was the whole secret behind doing this whole thing, was being able to drive it in there and not being able to pull it out. So there we go. So now what we'll do is we're going to cut this long. I'll grind off whatever's left over, but now we got a spring sticking back out of this thing so that the sear will rotate. Who knew? So I've got this trapped in a vise right here. And yes, there's a piece of missing metal there, and I don't know what I'm going to do about that piece of missing metal yet. I don't know if I want to bug my welder guy. I don't know if I want to bug Colin to weld something on there. I may just solder it. So this may or may not hold up. So we're just going to clean up this notch here. And I'm roughing it up now. From the time we prep this till the time we tin it, we got about 5 minutes. While it's open atmospheric oxygen. It may be early in the year here in Charleston, but God, the humidity is already over 70%. You got to be kidding me. Not a very big torch flame. Doesn't need to be. We're just going to heat this up. You don't want to turn your flux a dark color. If you turn your flux a dark color, it means you've burned it out. We're just going to get this hot enough that it'll melt the solder. See how that melted? Okay, a little bit more. I'm going to put some flux on the solder now. Okay. I've left this piece of wire long just because I want to be able to grab it. I went up inside and filed that. So this gives me something to hang on to. It's a movie prop, so I'm going to make it work. But at the end of the day, this was not a very good design, and I don't like it. And it was jank when it was made, and it's jank now. Okay, so what this has allowed me to do now is put this spring down around the other side, and then I'll bend this open to get the flex I want on it, but this still has a spring temper on it. You see, we didn't get it hot enough to draw the temper off the spring, so this setup's going to work. And note that I've got solder coming all the way around over the top and underneath, and it all melded to it, so it's not a half-bat joint. So we're going to just bend this out and see if we got it working. I don't know, and I don't want to find out, but this is a band that locks the barrel in, and I got a feeling that if we had really gotten aggressive with it, we could have probably threaded the barrel off of the receiver. And it's not a takedown in the traditional sense, but I don't want to find out. So I've kind of knocked that into the tight up against the receiver position, and I'm going to put this screw in and torque it down as fastener number 1, just because I don't want to forget about it. This is the ejector, and I think the ejector's got that. It's a funny bend, but I think somebody put it there on purpose. But I'm not gonna go in there and try to reinvent the wheel, or to quote Rick, to look for the fifth leg of the cat. Now, this is going to come back apart, but I'm oiling it like it's not gonna, because I'm just oiling like it's not gonna. Okay, I just put some oil on that. Just because I want that. I've already oiled up inside of it. Now you see this is locked shut, and the only way to unlock it is to push in on the trigger. I'm sorry, the firing pin. When you push in on the firing pin, it allows this all to come back around and unlock. Those of you that ever done like a little 22 calorie gun or something, it's the same deal. Okay, this has to slide up in there. And it's goofy. We've had to rattle with it a couple of times. All right, that sets down. And we're just going to run that all the way up home. All right. There's a cam here and a cam path here. So this has to run in the cam path and drop down in here, and it has its own screw. Now all these screws are of different sizes, so it makes it more difficult to put the gun together wrong than you might think. So we got to get this. Nope, I went a little bit too far. There it is. That goes in there. I'll run that down home. Now this has the ability, this is now being held in by there's a spear that's sticking out the front of it, of the bolt carrier, that holds that down. That's fine, we'll figure all that out in a minute. All right, next piece. We're putting this sear in first because it makes more sense to have it in before everything else goes in. You just run out of room. This sear sits here. As you can see, it's going to ride on the hammer, and this is the bolt for that. And we got to get that right up in there. Now there's just enough spring tension on this to push it into the hammer. You know, and we don't have too much. There's not a lot of room there to really make it snappy, but we should be able to. Okay, we should be able to take the hammer the hammer's in here where it's supposed to go. Wait a minute. In here. This is not the assembly order, but I want to show you something. If we put that pin through there, this, as it comes back, should cock. You hear that? And now it won't drop. And that's the piece, that's one of the pieces that wasn't working before. Now, the only way to get that to drop would be to pop this thing in and out of lock. And I can't do that from where I'm sitting because I don't have my fingers in here. So we'll just do it the old school way and we'll pull this out. But that's what that does. All right, so you heard it click, right? So that piece is in. Now we're going to go after the lock. This is the inertial block. This inertial block has a spring-loaded pin here that allows something to wipe across it and hold until it's brought back to a place where we can get back around it again. All right, so this lock goes up inside. Let's see here, I gotta be this way. There we go. That goes in there and this goes in here. So I'll get my fingers out of the way here in a minute. Oh, let's see, I gotta come in from this side. So this, when we took this out, this thing looked like this. You see all that orange filth? That orange filth was what this thing thought it was rotating on, and it wasn't, and that was no good. So this all goes in here, you see. And then this will push up against the bottom metal here, and it spring loads this entire piece that way. But under inertia, under recoil load, the gun takes off to the rear, and this mass wants to stay here. So this will compress this spring, unlock the bolt, and allow you to cycle it. But it also means that the gun will stay locked unless you intentionally unlock it or the gun's under recoil. So that's what this safety feature does. We'll go ahead and we'll make sure then that that screw is run all the way down. This safety feature was not operational when we got to the gun, and it was ugly. Okay, don't over tighten this screw for right now, because if you do, you pull the walls of the receiver in and it makes it difficult to put the bottom metal on it, which we will do now. Okay, we have previously installed the trigger spring on the bottom. That small screw comes in from the top and hangs onto it. The main spring comes through this way. I like this setup better than the Winchester setup, because here in the Winchester setup, you undo the wrong screw, you will screw up the mainspring in the bottom. But this one, they don't give you a choice. You only got one screw to take the gun apart with. All right, so in this particular case, we're kind of in this ordeal here. Now, this roller here has to be free to move, and that roller was not free to move, and we drove the pin out, cleaned everything up, and put it back together again, and that roller rolls right there on the bottom of that, and it's an anti-friction roller. So if you get that roller right, that's supposed to ride there. Now what we're going to have to do is get all of this to show up in the same place at the same time. So we're going to have to play with this a little bit. That has to go in there and then come up forward. This has to be up under there like that. You see how I just pushed that with my finger? And then boom, we got the spud in. All right. So now we're going to take these two side screws. So this spud, beginning gunsmiths, this is a scratch all, but I've kind of dulled the point down. But this is a great way to get things to align. I think the construction guys call it a spud, and you usually see it on the back end of you've got a crescent hammer up the other end of it. So let's see if I can get that screw to go anywhere near that. Am I even close? Hang on a minute. There we go. You see it ride down, dip down. Don't tighten these up yet. Just kind of get them running. And then we'll let all the tolerance stacking happen in the middle somewhere. All right, so that's going down. That's going down. And then this bad boy here, what direction is it got to come in from? Okay, the threads are on this side. The threads are on the outward side. So yeah, you can argue that I put the spud in the wrong way. We'll chase this out. We're going to keep it all captured. Where am I? There I am. I don't want to let the hammer go. I don't want anything. So there we go. Now we're out the right way. Now we can come through here. See, this whole thing here will move. See how that's unloading that screw? So while you're playing with this, you're looking for that one spot. You see that move there? You're looking for that one spot with no load on it. There we go. Okay. But dear God, don't just take the hammer and crack it, because you'll wipe the threads off the end of the screw. We don't want to do that. Okay. So that's in, and then we'll run this down, and we'll run this down. Now, we still haven't put the operating rod in this thing yet. Operating rod, or whatever the hell word we're using there. But that's at full cock. And the question becomes is, see, we're not locked. So because we're not locked, the hammer is going to stay up. The bolt moves, and we know that when the inside part of the bolt rocks this way, the gun locks shut. So we can come all the way up here, but we know we're not there yet because the trigger, see, hasn't disconnected. We're still back on that other safety, right? So we push this all the way forward, push in on the firing pin, which unlocks it, and pop it down there. Now, did you see the hammer go dunk? When the hammer made that little stutter, that was the other interlock clearing, and now we know it cleared because now that trigger works and we're not on that safety sear. With this all the way back here, what we can do now, we have to have this locked all the way shut so that this can get up underneath. Let me show you which part I'm talking about here. There's a pathway in here underneath this part. So what we want is to be able to slide this back in. It'll grab it, we'll shove it back a little bit, it'll kick it out, and it'll lock it. as long as you don't ever let it come back forward, far enough forward. Once you come forward past a certain point, it's just like in 1897, it rides right on out. The best we can tell here, when this thing broke, the gun took off to the rear and it drugged the mounting stud rearward, and it garroted this. I've kind of beat all this down to try to sort of make it round, but at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, I'm not really positive how to put this whole thing back together again. Now we know that there's a stud hole here. You see how that hole's big and this hole's small? So this has to go over the top of that, right? And it will do it with the mag tube in here. I don't have the guts in the mag tube yet, and I think I probably ought to put them in right now. But when we slide this in, that will sit down over the top of it, and that'll lock everything together, and then there'll be a screw that goes down through that and holds this all in. Now, how it's all held to the gun probably has to do with this piece that we repaired here. You see, this will snap into that, and it'll hang on to it now. We've gone ahead and made that. I put a little bit of oil on the fowler here, and I'm going to see if I can get this to go all the way to the bottom, because this tube has just been annihilated. Okay, now that went to the bottom, you heard it drop, right? So the magazine tube spring will go in it, and what I'm doing here is I'm checking to make sure that this is free to move here. There's a slight curl on here, and that doesn't eject. Okay, so what's going to hold that in is going to be the big hole is going to ride over the top like that, and the magazine tube has got to be on like that. So this is going to be the orientation that this has to go in. Once that's all there, and I think if we release this, this will, if we unlock it, that will actually come open and shut again. You see how that's working there? Okay, so we're all right there. We can pull that back a little bit and leave that alone. All right. This then needs to be pulled forward until that hole appears. And am I close? Yeah, I'm getting close. So this has to be pulled forward until that screw hole appears. And that screw hole right there is the screw hole that's the screw that goes down and holds the magazine pin to the top of the gun. So this will go down that hole like that. And then we'll slide it forward a little bit and put the funky little locking screw in it. Okay, so that will go down, and it's got to go down below the level of the inside of the tube, right? And then, where was the other locking screw? Okay, now that goes there, and this little itsy bitsy lock screw goes in here. And you're darn right, I swept the floor before we started doing this, because this is insane. Okay. So that has to be there we go. All right, so now the magazine tube is secured to the gun. And now what we got to do is go in and plug this in, and this should snap in. And it might not. But what I'm trying to figure out is this is just being held to the front end of the gun. And all it does, okay, the magazine tube is secured to this front plug, and the front plug is secured to the stud, and the stud is secured to the barrel. There it is. I just figured it out, all right? So this was our... Where was our crazy hole? I don't know. Is this one going here? Yep. So Bruno's kind of talking me through this, because he's been off to the side sort of sorting through this while I was making springs and doing other crazy stuff. So that goes in there. And then this now has to go to the rear to close up that space back there, right? And when that does that, this should snap over that. Now why? Okay, I'm now uncovered for a large screw with a lock. That's a large screw with a lock. Nope. Okay. This is our UA set of holes right here, but I got a feeling that this will slide to the rear, and as it slides to the rear, this will come over and it should snap in, and it locked it. So to unlock it, you know, I don't know how far in we are, but okay, see that came out? So we may have to do a little bit more, yeah, where this has to come all the way out and it'll be locked, and that'll snap this shut. I'm unfamiliar with this setup, all right? And what they did before was they just put a screw, they drill a hole, and they stuck a screw through here like that in order to tie it all together. Okay. So that's shut, and we know that that's locked because that came down, right? That came down. So there's the half cock, full cock, and then the extra cock would be up there. So if we take the gun out of battery, right? We now know that there's a cock position beyond that, right there. So when the gun locks shut, that should drop down onto the main sear, okay? Or if we're out of battery and we're sitting on that and we got our finger on a trigger, when this comes shut, the hammer should drop all the way, and it does. So this is how it does what a 97 does, except that it's not all timing. The gun actually had to be locked before it would do that. A lot of these jobs are about the critical flow path in the job. What's the thing that's going to hang you up? And it wasn't the wood on the fore end. The wood, that's a total other thing here. We got to make sure the gun's going to run before I put another 15 or 20 hours into making a fore end for this thing. So the gun is unusual in the fact that it has an inertial safety device. So even though the hammer's down, we can't get it open until we clear the inertial safety device. This is not an inertial reset like, say, you have on an over and under where the gun's got to run into your shoulder and reset. This thing, when the gun takes off to the rear and the inertial block compresses the springs and it clears, all right? It's an unusual piece of kit. It may or may not work. It may or may not extract. It may not eject. It may not feed. So we're only going to give it one round in case it goes full auto. Okay, so it went off and it cleared the interlock and it ejected. So that spring we made for the extractor, it's still jank as all get out, but you know how that goes. All right, so 1, 2, 3. These are modern star crimp shells. This gun was made in 1916. I just got the gun out of sequence, but I wanted to demonstrate something. If you have your finger on the trigger, you've pulled, and this thing's got some feeding issues. We'll get in there and figure it out. There's a feed latch that's kind of getting a little bit hung up. We'll get in there and deal with it. But if you left your finger on the trigger when you fed the last round, that safety interlock will let go and the gun will go off when you shut it, just like in 1897. But this is a very positive setup. I'm kind of liking it. So now that we know it works, we can put the last round of cosmetics. See, it didn't, because I was couching, it didn't clear that. We can put the last round of cosmetics in this and go back in, all right? If you spend all your time, you get it all cosmetically right, and then you run into a malfunction, it's the end of game, you've just dumped an awful lot of time into a process that you're never gonna get back out of it. So just in closing here, I would say that there are some projects that when you get into them, you gotta know when the heck to stop. And this should have been one of them. But hey, you know how that works. And as always, it has been a pleasure to try to show you guys some stuff you're not gonna see anywhere else.